Let's talk. Let's talk.
Hello and welcome to Let's Talk with me, Alicia Ali. In today's edition, we speak to the Escazú Agreement, which is a groundbreaking, innovative agreement. It's an environmental rights agreement, the first of our kind in the Western Hemisphere. To help me talk about that is Kate Wilson and Danielle Gordon from the Department of Sustainable Development. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you very much, Alicia, and thank you so much for giving us your platform to discuss and educate the public on this.
You are always welcomed, and it is such an important agreement. So, first of all, we have to give a little bit of a background. What is the Escazú Agreement?
Well, the Escazú Agreement, in fact, the correct name for the agreement is the Regional Agreement on Access to Information, Public Participation and Justice in Environmental Matters in Latin America and the Caribbean.
That is a very long name.
It is. So that is why we prefer to call it the Escazú Agreement. And it's called the Escazú Agreement simply because it was endorsed at a high-level segment in a small town called Escazú in San Jose, Costa Rica.
And that agreement, it took many years of negotiations to come to that agreement. But why is it groundbreaking?
It is groundbreaking because it is visionary. It looks forward, it looks towards the future in terms of making access rights to environmental information a basic human right. It looks at equality, it looks at sustainability, and it allows us to streamline our obligations as they pertain to our sustainable development goals. It is a wonderful tool. It is the first of its kind that allows for protection for environmental defenders.
And Danielle, let's get to you because I know you have, so Kate is the legal officer, right. And what is your role with regards to the Escazú Agreement?
Okay, so the Escazú Agreement speaks to public participation in environmental matters as well as information sharing. So I am the manager of a project that seeks to increase St. Lucia's capacity to monitor the implementation of multilateral environmental agreements and also the sustainable development of St. Lucia. And as the Escazú Agreement speaks to public participation and information sharing, one of the major products of the project would be the development of the National Environmental Information Management System, which seeks to ensure that St. Lucians have access to information on our environment and they have access to the data that would guide the policy decisions and so at the higher levels for environmental governance.
Okay, and you know, one of the things that is very interesting about this agreement is that it speaks to specific tenants. So we're talking about environmental human rights activists being defended. What else about the participatory communication aspect is so important about this agreement?
Well, you know, for any democracy to be able to, for things to run smoothly in any democracy, you must be able to give the public proper access to information. You should also be able to allow them to participate, not just when the decision has been taken, but at all levels of decision making, and also access to justice, so that all persons can have legal standing, or at least a framework is set up to have legal standing, and so that persons can have redress where environmental concerns need redress.
And you know, it's a very unique situation for the Caribbean. I mean, I guess as we are on the archipelago, when we hear environmental activism, it's not on the same scale as with Latin America, because remember, Latin America has access to resources, whether it's gold or oil, and you know, all the environmental concerns that go with, you know, retrieving those sorts of resources. And so that is why it's so important for the environmental protection aspect of it. Danielle, can you tell us, in terms of implementation, what sort of landscape are we looking at?
Okay, well, we are actually now mainstreaming the use of the National Environmental Information System, and we're just rounding that up. So the focus of this last leg of the project would be to have public awareness, outreach, and also participation, to let the public know that their voice also matters, their input matters, and they need to know exactly what is going on in our country as it relates to climate change, land degradation, and also protecting our biodiversity. So in that aspect.
And how did this information system come together?
Okay, so we have 17 agencies, private and also public agencies, that have signed on to a memorandum of understanding. So they all agree to share their data, and these data are like in relation to the indicators onto the various multilateral environmental agreements that speak to, as once again, biodiversity, climate change, and desertification. So when they upload this data to this system with the indicators, the data corresponding to those indicators, we are able to report on our progress in meeting our obligations under the multilateral environmental agreements.
Who are some of the agencies involved in can I call it the NEIS?
Yes, that's a shortened form because it's the National Environmental Information System.
Yes.
So we have departments like infrastructure, people management area, we have Central Statistics Office, we have the National Trust as well, a number of agencies on board with us.
So it's cross-governmental, but also in the civil society sphere.
Yes.
So there's that sort of collaboration
Yes.
to ensure that the Escazú Agreement is not only implemented, but successful.
Right.
Definitely.
Yes.
Because one thing that came out of the Rio Plus meeting years ago in 2012 was that environmental matters cannot be handled by one person alone. It involves a collaborative effort from all stakeholders. So you would be hearing our PSAs, which have been running, say, civil society, students, academia. We want everybody to join the conversation because the DSD cannot do it alone. It's environmental issues is not an issue for one department alone. It is cross-cutting, so everybody has to be on board.
And I'm so interested in that particular aspect. But before I question you on that further, we are due for a break right now. And so, viewers, stay with us. There is so much more to discuss about the Escazú Agreement. We'll be back in just a moment.
Oi, you realize you step on my toe?
Well, do something about it.
Gasai busting diamond.
Hold on.
If somebody try to cross you, and the matting start to take you, no need for war or violence, cause the police there to help you. If a trouble start in this session, alright, no need for aggression. We don't want no violence in the place.
Control your temper, respect each other. Don't let no trouble escalate, cause you know better. Control your temper, respect each other. Don't let no trouble escalate, cause you know better.
Control your temper. A message from Mission Boys, Studio 758, Acid Creations, and the Royal St. Lucia Police Force.
Welcome back to Let's Talk with me, Alicia Ali, and we're talking about environmental protection in regards to the Escazú Agreement, and we have Daniel Gordon and Kate Wilson from the Department of Sustainable Development. Now, just before we went off, we were talking about the NEIS and data, right? So let's talk about the data. Let's talk about how the data is used, how it's collected, how it's collated, you know, and just the implementation surrounding the NEIS.
Right, so the National Environmental Information System, it also includes a common data storage facility, and that CDSF is where we have the MEA focal points that have signed on to the MOU that we referred to earlier on, and they are responsible for uploading the data in relation to the indicators that will guide the implementation, that will allow us to report on the implementation of the MEAs. So from each agency, you have a data curator and a data contributor. The data curator ensures that this data is actually accurate and ensures that the frequency of the uploading is in keeping with our reporting obligations. And then you have the contributor, who's the person responsible for uploading that data. So to ensure that these persons are in tune with their role, we have training going on for them so they know exactly what their role is, what type of data is actually required for the NEIS to then generate reports. And these reports will then guide our policy development, our decisions in relation to our environmental matters. These reports and also the raw data would be available to students, maybe PhD students, even our secondary school students pursuing their SBAs and so on, that can provide information on our environmental management in St. Lucia.
Now, I heard you talk about implementation obligations. Now, just before I go to that, I would just want to ask one thing about the data analysis, Daniel. Okay, you spoke about our students, PhD students and whatnot, but how does the data analysis really translate into us meeting the obligations, number one, and actually changing what is happening with our environment and protecting our environment? The average Joe on the street, how does that affect them?
Okay, so each of the conventions have particular indicators, different probably variables that would be measured by our various agencies, our MEA focal points. And that information would tell us, well, we're about to meet all our obligations or not. And those obligations would also speak to the broader objectives and goals for our environmental governance. So without that information, without that data, that we would translate into our various reports, probably generate quantitative data that it'll project into, for example, in our case, we have development of environmental scenarios that is compiled into a public education film called St. Lucia Into the Future. And that is basically tells us the plausible future of St. Lucia in the next 10 to 50 years if we do not, let's say, we make moves towards climate change mitigation and adaptation. We do not move towards sustainable land practices. Then what will be left of our St. Lucia? We have to ensure that it is sustainable for our generations to come.
And so, okay, now going back to you, what are our implementation obligations?
Okay, so Alicia, the Escazú agreement has a number of provisions, and particularly when it comes to its implementation. And the first, Article 10 of this agreement, talks about capacity building, and it speaks specifically where countries are required to create and strengthen national capacities based on its needs and priorities. And one of the things that they mention, which is exactly up Ms. Gordon's alley, is providing adequate equipment and resources, and that's where the NEIS comes in. Also, they are asking to develop and strengthen environmental laws and access rights awareness. And as we speak, the World Resources Institute has indicated to the Department of Sustainable Development that they have resources available, they have funding available for a legislative review for 3 Caribbean countries towards implementation of the Escazú Agreement. And our minister, the Honorable Dr. T.C. Rigobert, as well as our permanent secretary, Ms. Caroline Eugene, they are on board, and they believe that St. Lucia ought to take advantage of that opportunity. Also, the agreement asks specifically to develop specific measures for persons in vulnerable, or groups in vulnerable situations. So persons who cannot understand English or Spanish for the Latin American countries, translators should be developed, interpreters should be developed. In fact, again, as we speak, we are working closely with the St. Lucia National Trust to do an all Creole production on Escazú using local talent like Kendall, Hippolyte, Taj Ricks, and we are also approaching the Folk Research Center to assist us in the translation of our promotional materials on the Escazú Agreement.
And this sounds like such an exciting agreement, and I really do hope our viewers learned quite a bit. And you know, we're almost at the end of our program. So can we have some final words from you, Daniel? We could start with you, and then we can go end with Kate.
Okay, so I would just like everybody to know that soon the projects will be embarking on a very robust public education campaign, and we're encouraging all persons from schools, from our government agencies, everyone to get on board to ensure that, you know, we are all involved in the environmental management for our sustainable development of St. Lucia.
Thank you, Daniel. Kate?
Well, Alicia, what I must say is that our governments and our people should get involved in the conversation. Ratification is going to be extremely beneficial to St. Lucia. Why? Because it is going to do a number of things. It's going to increase our visibility St. Lucia's visibility in the regional and international sphere. It is going to open up a door for us to have structural assistance from donors. It is going to also increase our efficiency because of the sharing of information between islands. It is also going to set common standards for the region and for public participation, access to information and justice. So it's extremely important, and we are asking our people and our governments, Escazú now ratify.
Thank you so very much, Kate. Viewers, thank you so very much for tuning in. I am Alicia Ali. This has been Let's Talk. Thank you very much to Government Information Service. This has been a production of a collaboration between the GIS and the Communications Unit of the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Relations, and Sustainable Development. On behalf of all of us here, I say thank you and stay tuned. Okay, so don't move
Let's
just
talk.
yet. Pretend I said something.
Let's talk.